Welcome to the Your Life After Tech podcast. This is episode number 6. I'm Debbie Levitt. Don't forget to check out our lifeaftertech.info multiverse, including our book, Discord community, coaching, and more. Because you might be done with tech, tech might be done with you, or you're thinking about adding non-tech work to your tech career. Today's guest is Simone Robutti, Simonerobutti, and you can find him at robutti.me. Oh, sorry, I said that in Italian. robutti.me. Plus, lots of other links in our episode description. Simone is quite the storyteller. It's easy to fall in love with him, but sometimes a little hard to follow exactly where he's going with everything. But follow him down the path of so many interesting stories about different jobs he's done and what he's doing now, especially now that he's gotten out of tech. Let's get to know Simone.
Hello everybody, I'm Simone, and today I'm going to talk to you about life after tech, and I think I should start from my studies, or better, maybe even before. Like at 4 years old, I was put in front of a computer by my father to play video games, and I kinda never left. So when it was time to pick a university course, it was quite obvious that I would have gone for computer science. I'm from Italy, so there it's called informatica. It's slightly different than computer science, but you can think of something about between computer science and software engineering. And I studied in Milan for 6 years, almost 7, because I wasn't very good at studying, especially the first few years. Then I started working in a small consultancy as a data engineer / machine learning engineer. My master thesis was also in those topics. And I worked as a Scala Spark developer for around a year and a half, first as a consultant in a bank that was the most hellish and, a hellish circus with, endless amounts of consultants, endless budget, and idea of how to make use of them, and a lot of, managers on cocaine and projects that didn't make any sense, and hierarchies and internal strife, and so on and so forth, and data leaks. That's
what a soap opera! Wow.
Yeah. I have a lot of characters that would, fill a book from that time. Then, luckily, after I finished my first project there, that now would be illegal, or illicit under GDPR, but whatever. I was moved to a small spin-off startup of my consultancy company. I stayed there a few months, and then I moved to Germany because I was tired of this stuff. It was Milan, so very hectic, work culture, stressful, and if most of the money coming from banks or insurances and stuff like this. So I moved to Germany when I was 26. That was 7 years ago. And I kept working as a data engineer with a bit of machine learning in between. First in a startup doing crowd analytics on telco data. So we were checking how people were working around the city based on the connection between their phone and the cell phone tower. And then I moved to another startup where I stayed for 4 years, working again as a data engineer. This was in self-driving cars. It was before COVID, and there was still belief that this would work. Now self-driving cars are kind of they are not happening. And especially after COVID hit, here in Germany, all the car makers were like, no more money, let's close the faucet. And so eventually startup started going down. And last year I did not much, let's say, because they were pivoting to food delivery robots without any previous knowledge of the topic. And and it was a doomed market because it just doesn't make sense economically. like they smash one robot, you lose 10,000, 20,000 euros of equipment, and yeah, it's cheaper to exploit riders. And riders are actually the reason, the first. No, it's not true. So after that, I'm doing nothing here. I'm earning money. It's nice. It's comfy. It's cozy. I held up for like 1 year, 2 years of this life. And then I was like, even the 1 hour, 2 hours of work I do every day, like effective hours, were like a torture, not because, it was a bad life. I was living a very privileged and comfy life, but it was so meaningless and performative. I was like, okay, I saved the money. I saved enough money. Eventually, I need to jump the ship, and because also the company was going down. So the chance was this request from a friend to start a cooperative in Italy to do consultancy to other cooperatives. So it was politically motivated to some degree. It was closer to what I wanted to do. And because in the meanwhile, in this startup, but also in my political activity in an organization called Tech Workers Coalition, that is concerned with unionizing tech workers, I was getting interested more and more in the topic of organizations, how to build organizations, how to take decisions, facilitation, and so on and so forth. And so in this consultancy for other cooperatives, the package, the idea, the business proposition was like, we help you with the software, but we help you also with the process, with the governance. We teach you how to build this stuff without reproducing the bad patterns of startups or corporate environments. So democratic decision making and more sustainable work pace and stuff like that. Then the cooperative didn't, like, after some months of working on it, we understood we weren't aligned on a few things. So before signing and forming the cooperative, we're like, it's better not to do it. And I was talking about riders. So the next real job I had after this short attempt to start a cooperative was in a research group that was doing research on social harm of AI and recommender systems and social media in general, but also doing research on food delivery platforms and how the workers, like the riders, are surveilled through their app. And I wasn't actually directly involved in that. It was done before I actually joined the organization, but I was hired to kind of continue that. But then, things changed. So in this research group, I was supposed to be a data engineer working on this stuff. But then I was like, and this was like democratically run, no bosses, no managers. It was around 12 to 15 people, let's say, over a course of 2 years. And I was like, guys, none of you ever had a real job. Like, half of them were researchers, the other half were hackers. And I was like, I don't want to work like this. It's so fucking messy. And I'm like, I quit the tech industry to quit with the bullshit. I don't want to do stuff like this. So for 9 months, I focused almost entirely on building up the organization and structuring their processes and making them work.
And when was this?
This was 3 years ago.
Okay. So about
off.
3 years ago,
Yeah,
you were done with the bullshit from tech and you started shifting out.
Shifting out, I was fully out because this job was against tech. Even though I was a programmer, it was politically very openly against the tech sector.
Interesting.
So because we were, for examples of researches we did, was like proving that TikTok was supporting Russian propaganda on war, or we proved that Microsoft Copilot, at the time was called Bing Chat, was giving misleading information on elections in Germany and Switzerland, or like effects of like recommender systems of Amazon, Facebook, whatever. So this was it wasn't in collaboration with these companies. It was openly adversarial to these companies. Wow. And we did a lot of meaningful research, very impactful in that space. The group was called Tracking Exposed when I joined. Then we changed name to AI Forensics. Look it up if you want to see interesting things on how the tech sector works. And I stayed there for 2 years because, all in all, it was a very nice experience. After I cleaned up the mess, let's say, people were very happy about what we were doing. It had meaning. It was a change of pace because I was like one of the things that matters to me, that touches me the most after leaving tech and changing job, is like that now people are like kind of grateful, or at least impressed, but not impressed, that's maybe a big word, but like they have a positive reaction when I say what I'm doing. That is something that, if you are doing self-driving cars, maybe they say it's cool, but they are hardly grateful. So and so when I was doing this kind of research, there were people like, when I, like, after introducing myself, saying what I do, they were like, thank you for the work you're doing. And it's not like being a firefighter where you're kind of hero by default, but it's a step towards that. And I stayed there for 2 years. And after we finished this project on Microsoft Copilot, that I led, even though I have no background for research, but I'm just good at organizing stuff. So they put me in charge of the project. The project was successful to a degree. And I was like, I don't want to do research. Like, I'm not shaped in the form of a researcher. It's not my thing, because the uncertainty of the outcome, or like, especially in this case where you're adversarial against these companies that might change their software overnight, and you're like, I spent 6 months analyzing something that doesn't exist anymore, and we don't publish anything, and we go. So I was like, it's fine, I don't want to do it again. And so I quit, but in good terms. Like, we had a very emotional separation. They bought me an Adidas tracksuit with the logo of the group, because I for Tech Workers Coalition, the organization I told about before, in Italy we use tracksuits as the kind of uniform to go speak in public, as a meme, like to promote the idea that tech workers wear Adidas tracksuits, whatever. Like, it's between an inner joke and aesthetic performance. But so I have endless Adidas tracksuits, and they bought me a green one with the logo of AI Forensics as a gift, that nobody gave me a parting gift when I was working in tech. Maybe in Italy they buy you. No, you have to buy croissants and bring them to the office. They don't even buy them for you. But a custom gift is not a thing. That you see. Also, they printed in AI Forensics. They printed me a paper with a bunch of memes from when I was there, or like photos of me and this kind of stuff. So it was very nice experience. But I was like, guys, if you start doing something else, fine. But if we stick to research, and we're a research group, I'm like, I'm done with this. So we're still in touch, and we're on good terms. And after that, kind of started the phase where I'm in now, where I am working several different jobs, somehow all related, but also not. The main one being organizational consultant, that for cooperatives, political collectives, associations, NGOs, and whatever I feel it's aligned with my values, plus a music school, because I'm like, it's a Berlin music school. I'm like, that's full of cool kids. I'm like, I want to be a cool kid too, and it seems like a nice environment anyway. So I'm also starting working with them. But so I help these kind of like democratic small organizations to work better, to take decision making done in a different way, processes done in a different way, because even if some of them studied organizational sciences or management and so on, often that's tailored to big corporate or startups that have different values, different needs, and it just doesn't work. So I try to specialize somehow in this. It's not even a niche, because there are a lot of these organizations, but they just don't think they can afford, or they deserve to have a consultant for this kind of stuff. But somehow economically, and I make it work. So I have packages that kind of change how they work positively. and that's my main thing.
But you
Beyond
said you have a lot of
I
things.
also, yes, that's the main one. At least in terms of narrative. Then in terms of time, I'm not sure. I should track the hours, but I work. The other thing I do is I work with the fermentation studio of my partner that gives classes about, let's say, from beginner to advanced fermentation. And we also organize community events here in Berlin. And the studio is called True Fermentation, QU Fermentation. And there I'm a community and program manager. That is a fancy way to say I publish stuff on social media to promote events. I write the copy and I wash the jars before the classes because, they have
A
to be
quick
clean
question
and
on
sanitized.
fermentation, since we've ended up in
Yes.
an interesting world here. When I think of fermentation, I feel like that could be anything from alcohol to tofu to something else. What are you fermenting?
So in the studio, we do mostly koji-based stuff. Koji is the mold that is at the base of miso, sake, soy sauce, and so on. So our main, best-selling class is on miso, how to make miso. But we do a bunch of everything. We also do more basic stuff sometimes, like kombucha or kimchi. But the bulk is a bit more advanced, so miso. But my partner is also working in a restaurant, so she also does fermented tofu, or like she does like 20 products for the restaurant, different types of miso, shoyu, garum, and whatever that
Garum.
sometimes enter the program of the school. Yeah,
Yeah,
garum is
garum.
not
Just
the
in
Italian
case you're
garum.
into ancient Rome.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. It has the same name, but it's not like letting the fish rot in the
Oh, okay.
sun like the Romans did. It's kind of the same process on a chemical level, but it's not the same. So you can make garum is like anything that through enzymatic fermentation, like you leave, for example, I don't know, bread, or we made one with Parmesan. You leave it at 60 degrees for several weeks, and it produced this very flavorful liquid that you can use as a condiment.
So I'm going to try
Anyway,
to keep track
yeah,
of all
I'm
your
not-
jobs. We've got organizational design. We have helping your partner with a fermentation studio. What else is on the list?
So the third one, this happens a few times a year. I teach political praxis, mostly in a school in Italy called Scuola Capitale Sociale, where basically it's a primer on how to build a political organization from, grassroots political organization. So I give them a bit of everything, from how to build a strategy, how to facilitate meetings, how to, like, the software stack you might want to use, because otherwise they end up with WhatsApp chats and other Google Drive files. So I teach them a bit of everything. But sometimes I do just workshops, like one-off workshops. Like the course is like 5 weeks, but sometimes I do like 2 hours, 3 hours workshops in different spaces. That's the third one. And the fourth one is still in research. So when Tracking Exposed became AI Forensics and they changed name, the rider stuff was kind of pushed away, and now it's a group called Reversing Works. That is kind of the same people that were there before, but it's continuing that kind of research, let's say. And so we investigate food delivery platforms mostly. I cannot reveal too much information on the ongoing investigations because it's an investigation.
Of course.
So I cannot make names. But we are also doing platforms that are used for data labeling for AI, and checking how the workers on these platforms that do, when they're used by stuff like Google or OpenAI to say this prompt was offensive, or like write 3 lines of this and that, and there are humans behind, mostly in the third world, doing this kind of work, but there are also some in Europe, and we kind of check what these platforms are doing to them. But mostly this is focused on riders, And so the kind of information and data rights that are violated by companies, where like the workers' rights and data rights violated by companies, like stuff like Foodora, Deliveroo, Glovo, Liferando, and all these companies that I'm talking about. So in that, I'm doing mostly project management, because on the technical side, it's not my expertise. Like, we have a super hacker guy from Italy doing all the heavy lifting there. I just try to keep the pieces together.
Well, I'm going to take you in a new direction now. I want to ask you about these things that you're doing now. How do these new areas of work match your core personal qualities, like who you are at your core?
Mm-hmm. I think at some point I became this person that is responsible and organized and structured and accountable. And it keeps growing, meaning that before I was that person in my relationship, then I became that in the political environment, then eventually in the startup job, I was slowly taking that role, mostly shielding my team from work, but also like somehow I was perceived as a figure of, not of authority in the sense of like commanding authority, but like reliable in doing my role, and people were looking up to me and coming to me for advice and whatever. And this kept growing. So at some point, somebody called me an organizational daddy, and I might I don't use it because obviously it's inappropriate and vaguely sexualized, but that's kind of the relationship I tend to build with people, and it's not paternalistic. I don't say it in a paternalistic sense. I try to avoid that at all costs. But eventually, when there is trust and there is, understanding of my abilities, and that they have the experience that I can make their life better and easier, they kind of start relating to me in that way. So I would say that's the main element, and it keeps working. Like, I rarely take on too much work, and I'm like, guys, I have to cancel. That I try not to make it happen, and usually it's a sign that I'm doing something wrong. It happens very rarely, but so yeah, that's the hinge. I am kind of the hinge of a lot of these things happening, and I hold people accountable. So I'm the one going to them like, so this was supposed to happen. What's the problem? What's the issue? And I untangle their problems. And so okay. Another element of this is like, I always see myself as subservient in enabling people to do what they want to do. I'm like, I have my ideas and my opinions, but I'm like, I don't want to turn this into work, or like my projects are mine and I work on them kind of alone. When I'm in an organization, I'm like, you put the ideas and let's say I make the execution happen. This in a political setting, in a work setting, I try not to put too much my opinions on the table, and this builds a lot of trust, because I don't actually have a stake in one option rather than another, and so people always perceive me as neutral, and I can do what I think is the interest of the organization. But that's another role I tend to take a lot. I'm like, okay, let's try to bring your idea out and make it happen, rather than being like, I think the right way is this one. And somehow this sometimes ends very badly, because people then need to deal with the consequences of executing their ideas, and they're like, Simone, but how did it happen? Why did it ended up doing? Bro, you are the one that wanted this to happen. Now it happened. And so I also push back when I see something completely unreasonable, but I enable people, let's say.
All right, let's say that for sure. Thinking about when you were leaving tech and distancing yourself from all of the tech work you had done, is there any mistake or regret or something you wish you did it differently?
Not really, meaning that, I mean, I'm not a person that has regrets in general, and you live better without, so I don't really frame the past in this way. That said, I think there are things I understood afterward, but I wouldn't have really changed my course of action because I saved money for a lot of time to be able to pursue this path. And yes, I could have argued, like, I could have left 1 year before and saved less money, but I don't know, like, I don't really regret it. I'm like, I just have more money and more tranquility to keep doing this. Like what I'm doing right now, it's kind of getting sustainable, but yeah, it's still a long way before it's anywhere close the salary I was getting in tech. So I don't regret saving money. And actually, but let's say, okay, one point that was really complicated, and I think it's very useful for people that want to leave tech, was to set like, I was in a comfy position. I was in a very privileged position. So I always had the dilemma of like, I always had the choice of uh, entrenching myself in this privilege and then spend it, for example, in political activity, because I had a lot of time, I had a lot of money that I could spend or donate, and that's always on the table. But I was like, at some point, I need a point of closure where I just leave, because if it's not coming from the outside, I need to be the person doing that. And giving up privilege, especially when there is COVID, global collapse, economical collapse, and whatever. And also the tech industry is on a trajectory where the kind of privilege on average from tech workers is only gonna get worse, because there are endless layoffs, a lot of dynamics, and for sure in 10 years, the job I had, like cozy and well paid, will be a total rarity compared to now. So at some point, I just had to do it, and like there was no rational argument to do that in that moment. But so this was also up until now. It was up until recently. It was let's say always a point. Like, should I go back? Like when is reasonable to put your values or desires in front of like stability, because what I'm doing is destabilizing. I mean, I still have, again, for the privilege I talked about before, it's not like I'm taking big risks. I'm not like San Francis, like giving away all my wealth and being naked in nature. It's nowhere risky. Okay, yes, San Francisco for the ones watching on YouTube.
Yeah, sorry. For
But
those listening, I'm wearing a San Francisco shirt, so when he said St. Francis, I just wanted to make the visual connection there.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
San Francisco is totally not that place, but so it's not that kind of change. And I would advise people not to frame it in that way. Like, there's no reason to take risks, and it's just gonna make it harder. But that said, in the long term, when I think of my next 10, 20 years, and I think about how the world is going, I'm like, it's not the safest option, leaving the tech industry. But I had to sit with this feeling for a long time until a few weeks ago, that I think I got my point of closure, where in summer, I wasn't having too much work because a lot of my clients were Italian at the time, and Italians don't work in summer. And so I was like, no money is coming in. Maybe I made a terrible decision. This thing is not working out. Let's apply to some tech positions just because. Just let's see what can happen. And I did the first interview with the company here in Berlin. And I was like, they asked me, how much would you like to be paid? I was like, between 90 and 100K. That for Berlin is like
Euros.
quite good money. Euros, yes. Yeah. It's, let's say, 4 times the average salary in Germany, something like that. So, and it's like, yeah, almost double what I was earning. No, it's not double. It's 1/3 higher than what I was earning when I left. and it was good money. But it was the first interview, and so it's not certain that they would have offered it to me. But the interviewer was like, "Okay," she noted it down, no problem. And after I feel like when she was talking about, she explained me how the teams are structured and the hierarchy and who I would respond to. And there were like 4 or 5 people between me, possibly more, 4 or 5 people between me and the CEO. And the office, I was like, I don't want to go back into that. I really don't want to. And I after the first interview, I was like, I'm gonna cancel the interview process. I'm giving up on this salary. I had my point of closure. No going back. And luckily, then jobs started coming in again. As mid-September, so everything is fine. But that moment, I really had to make. It was a moment of closure because I had to give up a really. It wasn't an offer yet, but in my mind it was like, if they actually give me this money and it's a real offer, I don't know if I have the strength to say no. So I had to do it before, and it was
There you go.
emotionally very, very involved for my average relation to work. That is like work. I'm Italian. Work is not important. I know this is the wrong podcast to say this, but life
It's
is somewhere
fine.
else.
I
But
had it in my book,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
Italians made me take it out.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, the life is somewhere else. But I spent one day after this interview writing down the things I would lose if I went back into tech. It was a long list of stuff, including croissants in the morning at 11, because now I'm a freelancer. I can go to eat a croissant if I want. If I don't have meetings and I really want to, I can go and eat a
Leave tech so
cardamom
you can eat
croissant.
croissants when you want. That's it. That's the name of the episode. I think.
That was that was the first item on my list, and I came out of this emotional exercise hungry more than anything else. But there were a lot of other stuff like like naps was not the second, but quite close, because that's another thing. But I took naps also when I was working in tech. Like, work from home was a blessing, and that's one of the privileges of tech. I was also taking naps in the office at some point, but that's because I'm very good at maneuvering in office. I don't know, like the fact somehow this was registered as me working hard, and so I had to take naps even though I wasn't working hard. But this is an advanced technique that you need to be very Italian to achieve. I wouldn't suggest everybody to take naps in the office in front of your boss. It takes a while to spin it as a good thing.
Simone, your stories
In all of
are
these,
endlessly wild.
in all of this, just to finish on my departure from tech, when I left this startup I was talking about and not working much and taking naps, the manager was like, Simone, it's clear that you really cared about this job, and you were always so passionate and so on. I was like, sure. Like, this manager was the good guy. It wasn't the bad manager, but I was like, the disconnection was quite a lot. I mean, I liked him, but I didn't want to, to show that, bro, that's not what happened. But okay.
Oh my
But
gosh,
yeah.
and I thought Sardinians were storytellers. So, Simone, I have pretty much one last question for you, and that is, our listeners and watchers might be considering leaving tech or starting to add non-tech work to their universe. What advice would you give them?
Visualize what you want to do. That was my recurring thought. Rather than focusing on what you don't like about tech, focus on what would happen next and try to plan it and make it, realistic, little by little, because a jump into the unknown might not happen. Or like focusing too much on what's not working in the present might develop coping mechanisms. Like, you vent about it with your friends, but then you don't necessarily act on it. Some people do, some people don't. Then for me, the other thing was like political. So I didn't want to be complicit in a lot of stuff that is happening in tech. And every company, even I was in a decent company, like we weren't killing anybody, we weren't exploiting, labor of anybody, with no weapons, no whatever, no surveillance, because we were doing algorithms for self-driving cars that are not the most evil thing the tech sector is doing these days. But a lot of companies are doing this, and you might regret it going forward and say, I didn't do anything, even though I could. And that's another thought that was recurrent in my change. And doing something valuable with your time, it's also a matter of dignity. Like my experience in the tech sector was doing mostly useless stuff, either because it was intrinsically useless, like it shouldn't have been developed, or because it was developed in an environment that had no chance of turning this into a product somebody would use. And for me, it was a matter of dignity. I felt like stupid spending, or more frustrated, spending my day writing code that would have gone nowhere. And in startups, this is very common because most startups fail. Cope with it. Like if you're working in a startup, there's a very high chance it's gonna fail, and therefore you're wasting your time. Like you are not mandated to participate in figuring out what's gonna be the next unicorn. Like de facto, after, like, when you will look back, you will be like, those 4 years I pulled all-nighters, I worked on weekends, whatever, for something that left 0 marks on the board. And think about it, because for me, these were all very important elements to make this decision. Not everybody feels the same, but yeah.
All right. Well, our last question is, if people want to get in touch with you or follow you or, reach out to you, what are the best ways to do that?
Mm-hmm. So I have a personal website called robutti.me, where you can find a bunch of my stuff and some contacts. Otherwise, you can find me with the same name on Instagram or Telegram, or otherwise by email if you want to be professional and not sketchy. Simone@robutti.me. For sure, I'm gonna check it out and respond.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, with that wraps up our show. And thank you so much for coming on and telling us your story.
Thank you for having me, and good luck to all the listeners if they want to leave tech. We are waiting for you on the other side.
It's whatever, and it's never. Is it better?